Early, so ye shall if ye watch me. 'Twill be as good as a play.
We've never been to a play,
said Una. The lady looked at her and laughed. I'll make one for you. Watch! You are to imagine that she, Gloriana, Belle Phoebe, Elizabeth, has gone on a progress to Rye to comfort her sad heart. Maids are often melancholic, and while she halts at Brickwall House, the village, what was its name? She pushed Puck with her foot. Norgem, he croaked, and squatted by the wigwam. Norgem village loyally entertain her with a masque or play, and a Latin oration spoken by the parson, for whose false quantities, if I'd made 'em in my girlhood, I should have been whipped.
You whipped?
said Dan. Soundly, sirrah, soundly. She stomachs the affront to her scholarship, makes her grateful, gracious thanks from the teeth outwards, thus. The lady yawned. Oh, a queen may love her subjects in her heart, and yet be dog-wearied of 'em in body and mind. And so sits down," her skirts foamed about her as she sat, "to a banquet beneath Brickwall Oak. Here, for her sins, she is waited upon by what were the young cockerels' names that served Gloriana at table?" "Fruins, Courthopes, Fullers, Hussies," Puck began. She held up her long jewelled hand. "Spare the rest. They were the best blood of Sussex, and by so much the more clumsy in handling the dishes and plates. Wherefore," she looked funnily over her shoulder, "you are to think of Gloriana in a green and gold-laced habit, dreadfully expecting that the jostling youths behind her would, of pure jealousy or devotion, spatter it with sauces and wines. The gown was Philip's gift, too. At this happy juncture a queen's messenger, mounted and mired, spurs up the Rye road and delivers her a letter," she giggled. "A letter from a good, simple, frantic Spanish gentleman called Don Philip."
"That wasn't Philip, King of Spain?" Dan asked.
"Truly it was. 'Twixt you and me and the bedpost, young Burleigh, these kings and queens are very like men and women, and I've heard they write each other fond, foolish letters that none of their ministers should open."
"Did her ministers ever open Queen Elizabeth's letters?"
said Una. "Faith, yes. But she'd have done as much for theirs any day. You are to think of Gloriana, then they say she had a pretty hand excusing herself thus to the company, for the Queen's time is never her own. And while the music strikes up, reading Philip's letter, as I do." She drew a real letter from her pocket, and held it out almost at arm's length, like the old postmistress in the village when she reads telegrams. "Philip writes as ever most lovingly. He says his Gloriana is cold, for which reason he burns for her through a fair written page." She turned it with a snap. "What's here? Philip complains that certain of her gentlemen have fought against his generals in the Low Countries. He prays her to hang 'em when they re-enter her realms. That's as may be. Here's a list of burnt shipping slipped between two vows of burning adoration. Oh, poor Philip! His admirals at sea, no less than 3 of 'em, have been boarded, sacked, and scuttled on their lawful voyages by certain English mariners, gentlemen he will not call them, who are now at large and working more piracies in his American Ocean, which the Pope gave him. He and the Pope should guard it, then. Philip hears, but his devout ears will not credit it, that Gloriana in some fashion countenances these villains' misdeeds, shares in their booty, and, oh, shame! has even lent them ships royal for their sinful thefts. Therefore he requires, which is a word Gloriana loves not, requires that she shall hang 'em when they return to England, and afterwards shall account to him for all the goods and gold they have plundered. A most loving request! If Gloriana will not be Philip's bride, she shall be his broker and his butcher. Should she still be stiff-necked, he writes, see where the pen digged the innocent paper, that he hath both the means and the intention to be revenged on her. Aha! Now we come to the Spaniard in his shirt. She waved the letter merrily. Listen here. Philip will prepare for Gloriana a destruction from the west. A destruction from the west far exceeding that which Pedro de Avila wrought upon the Huguenots. And he rests and remains, kissing her feet and her hands, her slave, her enemy, or her conqueror, as he shall find that she uses him. She thrust back the letter under her cloak, and went on acting, but in a softer voice. All this while, hark to it, the wind blows through Brickwall Oak, the music plays, and with the company's eyes upon her, the Queen of England must think what this means. She cannot remember the name of Pedro de Avila, nor what he did to the Huguenots, nor when, nor where. She can only see darkly some dark motion moving in Philip's dark mind, for he hath never written before in this fashion. She must smile above the letter as though it were good news from her ministers, the smile that tires the mouth and the poor heart. What shall she do? Again her voice changed. You are to fancy that the music of a sudden wavers away. Chris Hatton, captain of her bodyguard, quits the table all red and ruffled, and Gloriana's virgin ear catches the clash of swords at work behind a wall. The mothers of Sussex look round to count their chicks, I mean those young gamecocks that waited on her. 2 dainty youths have stepped aside into Brickwall Garden with rapier and dagger on a private point of honour. They are haled out through the gate, disarmed and glaring, the lively image of a brace of young cupids transformed into pale, panting Cains. Ahem! Gloriana beckons awfully, thus. They come up for judgment. Their lives and estates lie at her mercy whom they have doubly offended, both as queen and woman. But la! What will not foolish young men do for a beautiful maid? Why, what did she do? What had they done? Said Una. Shh! You mar the play. Gloriana had guessed the cause of the trouble. They were handsome lads. So she frowns awhile, and tells 'em not to be bigger fools than their mothers had made 'em, and warns 'em, if they do not kiss and be friends on the instant, she'll have Chris Hatton horse and birch 'em in the style of the new school at Harrow. Chris looks sour at that. Lastly, because she needed time to think on Philip's letter burning in her pocket, she signifies her pleasure to dance with 'em and teach 'em better manners. Whereat the revived company call down heaven's blessing on her gracious head. Chris and the others prepare Brickwall House for a dance, and she walks in the clipped garden between those 2 lovely young sinners, who are both ready to sink for shame. They confess their fault. It appears that midway in the banquet, the elder, they were cousins, conceived that the Queen looked upon him with special favour. The younger, taking the look to himself, after some words gives the elder the lie. Hence, as she guessed, the duel. And which had she really looked at? Dan asked. Neither, except to wish them farther off. She was afraid all the while they'd spill dishes on her gown. She tells 'em this, poor chicks, and it completes their abasement. When they had grilled long enough, she says,